Hello everyone, welcome to English program of Ocast Media. This is part 2 of our discussion with Dr. Tsaggaye Ararsa. Dr. Tsaggaye, welcome to the discussion again.
Thank you.
I will directly go to my questions from part 1. The Ethiopian government officials are spreading hate and atrocities using the government main media streams and their personal social media accounts. For example, the Ethiopian government official, former Amara Regional State Vice President, and currently with the rank of Minister, Director General of the Ethiopian Foreign Relations Strategic Studies Institute, Mr. Yohannes Boyalo said that, quote, "We need to develop deep-rooted hate against the Tagarus, the Tigrayan people," unquote. They are spreading hate and atrocities against the citizens of Ethiopia. Where is the country heading? What is your analysis on this point, Dr. Tsaggaye?
One of the items that the U.S. bills try to discourage is the idea, the practice of hate speech and hate propaganda, both state-sponsored and not so sponsored. Interestingly, state officials at the Amhara region level, at the federal level, have been making this kind of hate speech, and this has already brought about lots of hate crimes. And Yohannes Boyaleo is a very prominent official. At some point, he was a deputy regional president, and now he is a leader of the director of the Strategic Center for Leadership. And he has been on media, I think in parliament, saying that we need to be as cruel as it is possible, humanly possible to be. On Tigrayans, we have to be very, very cruel. We need to have cruelty that that basically, that humans can muster. And it's not just him, Andargacho Sege, the advisor in some ways of the prime minister, the guy who gave him a roadmap, the former member of Gumbot Sabat, and later formed the Ethiopians for Citizenship and Social Justice, IZEMA. He has also been saying that we have to show savagery that the world has not seen. And there are footages of these. You have Brigadier General Kasai Chameda, an old veteran of the Ethiopian Armed Forces, who has said most similar things, not just about Tigrayans, but also about Oromos. In fact, with regard to the Tigrayans, he said he demonized them. He said they are demons. They are basically demons that have to be eradicated. And he advises the soldiers to aim at the Tigrayans in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, because they being Christians and the Tigrayans being demons, the war is also a way of exorcising the demons from Ethiopia. You have the Prime Minister's advisor, Deacon Daniel Kubret, who has been on record saying we have to eliminate these people, physically destroy their infrastructure, but you have to erase them from the national imaginary, from our memory. Erase them to the extent that to invoke their names becomes a taboo. And Daniel Kubret is the advisor of the Prime Minister. You have Tamany Bayena, a prominent artist, a stand-up comedian who lives in the United States, who has said all sorts of things about attacking these other peoples of Ethiopia. And so this is a regime that is steeped in atrocity crimes, in genocide and ethnic cleansing, probably in proportion to the officials, what the officials of the Nazi Germany were doing. It's a very fascistic tendency. It's extremely Amhara nationalist, although it goes in the name of Ethiopian nationalism. It is very, very hateful, and they call for the brutality of untold proportion. And this has happened also in Germany. It was, I think, Goebbels who said we want to have an army that is imperious, relentless, and so on and so forth. It's the same language they use. That is a generation that does not have any sense of fear, a generation that does not have any sense of sympathy, any sense of emotion, etc. And this is the same thing that is being preached from officials up in the higher echelons of power, as well as on the ground. And the media outlets are out there to speak this kind of things, and the hate propaganda continues to rage. And in fact, this is what steeps the entire system into a gross crime, which they will be accounted for. And it is no accident that the US Senate bill, as well as the US Congress bill, actually talks about human rights, justice, and accountability in order to forge a future towards peace. And I think there will be both an international and domestic trial for these people. And by the way, one of the things that is very shocking to many people is the cruelty that we saw when we saw a person being burned alive while begging them, while trying to move out of the fire, and they were putting some inflammable materials upon his body and telling him to go back into. People were shocked, and people were shocked because they thought this is an aberration, this is an anomaly. It is not. It has been a pattern for a long time now. It has been a pattern. A very famous business leader by the name Aitana Worku was saying clearly that we have to burn them and eat their bodies like the meat of goats. That's what he says. And these are the kind of discourses that brought about these cruelties, and this is where we are. And Johannes Bayaleo is one among many Ethiopian officials who actually called for elimination of a whole group of people and elimination through an extraordinary cruelty.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tsagai. Recently, there was an audio leaked from the meeting led by the former Oromo zone administrator in Hamara region, and he was terrorizing the residents. Go kill the rebel groups who oppose the ruling party, and he gave them 5 days.
Yeah,
and we have seen very cruel atrocities.
yes.
There is one Ethiopian citizen here in my city where I live, and she has a family. 6 of her family members were burned alive in her family house. In Chilga, in Gondar, she is a command woman. And one of my friend, he lives in Canada, and 9 of his relatives were killed from a single family member in Iban to Olaga.
Yeah.
And the former Oromo zone administrator has said that 130 colonels who refused the Tigray war were executed.
Yeah.
Where are we heading? They didn't learn from the 500,000 people died so far.
Yes. And mind you, 500,000 is only the ones that Ghent University could put a hands on and report with some evidence. And there are many more that are unaccounted for. And war has always been, in Ethiopia, war has been a major cause of death. And this one is no exception, but it has never been accounted for. No war has accounted for the date in Ethiopia's history. And the same is happening now. In fact, this is meant to kill a particular group of people, and they will never account for it. In fact, it's very interesting. There are some footages at some point in Benishangul Gumuz, I think. They kill about 7, 8 Oromos, and then they come out, these are Fanos, and they come out and say, we killed 8 Oromos. 8 Oromos. That's great. In fact, they use the pejorative word, Galla. And Simint Galla Gedilim. And it has become valorized. This kind of cruelty has been valorized. It has been appreciated, encouraged, and seen as an act of heroism. And in command, this burning alive, by the way, it has been going on 3 years before all this has started. 3 years before this. In fact, the Oromo Media Network reported about these kinds of killings, and they were very much criticized and attacked by the Amhara public because we reported the case, because no other media was reporting on them. And the command people have been survivors of all sorts of persecutions for ages. But this time around, they were out to eliminate them, and they stood their ground. Hopefully, they are now in solidarity with other groups like the Oromo Liberation Army and TDF, the Tigray Defense Forces, which is called the United Front of Federalists and Confederalists in Ethiopia. And they have actually rallied their support behind these groups, and they are trying to forge a new future for their own people as distinct from the Amhara region. And there are all sorts of atrocities happening, and Ahmed Hassan, the leader of the local government in the Wollo Oromo zone of Amhara region, just last week was speaking to civilians, local population, sheikhs, religious leaders, and teachers and bureaucrats, and he was saying to them to do 3 things: to go out and kill, disarm, or report any Oromo Liberation Army member or supporter. And if they don't do it in 5 days, then he's going to take measures. And he bluffs while they were sitting there. He calls them by name, some of them. He says, I know who you are. I know what you are capable of doing. And you know what? We have executed, he says. We have executed 130 Ethiopian colonels who have been trained at a great expense. And if we are that cruel on them, you can imagine how cruel we can be on you. This is how he speaks. And this kind of thing has been going on for a while, which means then, if Abiy Ahmed is not stopped at this point in time, if his forces are not defeated and disarmed, given the litany of hate speech and hate propaganda that is coming out of the mouths of the officials, I think we have to brace ourselves for a very difficult season, very difficult time of huge atrocities that are more gruesome than what have already happened so far. And this is why we say, and we insist, that Abiy Ahmed has to be stopped, and stopped now.
Yeah. Would the regime stop atrocities it has been committing against the Tagarus, the Tigray people and the Oromo, and make a peace? If not, what should be the Oromo people and the Tigray people response be?
Yep, the fact that he is already waging war in spite of the truce, and the fact that he's mobilizing about hundreds of thousands of soldiers to the war area shows that he's not going to stop the war. He's not going to seek a peaceful resolution to the whole problem. So we are, as I said, we have to brace ourselves for the worst. However, this is not the way to live for Oromos or for Tagarus. Of course, these two groups have no option except fighting. defending themselves. And of course, the Oromo Liberation Army is defending the Oromo people, and the TDF, the Tigray Defense Forces, have been defending the Tigrayan people to the extent they can. And they can, defeat Abiy Ahmed had it not been for the intervention of the Eritreans and the technological assistance from the United Arab Emirates and China and Turkey and Iran. And the sanctions that the international community may impose on these countries now, or at least on their the export of weapons to Ethiopia, might affect Abiy Ahmed to a certain extent. But the real defeat of the real fall of Abiy Ahmed happens only if the Oromo public supports their army and the Tigrayan public stand resolute in supporting their army and basically pursuing the genocidal forces of Abiy Ahmed to the very end. And there is already an alliance formed between the Oromo Liberation Army and the TDF, on the basis of which they have scaled that up to create the United Front of Federalists and Confederalists. And there are about 9 political parties coming together to put up a resistance against Abiy Ahmed. These groups, particularly the Tigrayan Defense Forces and the Oromo Liberation Army, had agreed on a joint roadmap. And that has been also endorsed by the United Front, the other members of the United Front. The joint roadmap, which I am very privy to, because I've been involved in the drafting of it as well, proposes a 3-staged, 3-phased transitional arrangement to come. Transitional arrangement that has 3 major phases. And the first phase is, of course, defeating Abiy Ahmed's army, disarming the genocidal forces which are spread across the country, removing the Eritrean forces from Ethiopian territory and from meddling within the Ethiopian Ethiopian politics and economy, and making sure that perpetrators are arrested and taken care of until put in detention until a transitional justice system is established. That's task number 1. So the first reason for the alliance is to resist and defeat Abiy Ahmed. And second thing they do is to establish a provisional government of the regions as well as a federal government. A provisional government of the victors, basically. Because Abiy Ahmed, if he wants negotiation, these forces want peace. But they have put a set of preconditions. And of course, Abiy Ahmed is not taking those preconditions. If he's not going to take preconditions and if he's in for a war of elimination, then what we can do is, from their point of view, what they can do is to resist, defeat, and disarm Abiy Ahmed's forces and his associates. Having done that, their plan, their roadmap, and by the way, they were very close to taking power in last October when they returned from Debre Brahan. And when the TDF withdrew from the large swaths of Ethiopian territory that they had conquered. And in those days, that was when they were preparing to launch a roadmap that will be implemented if it so happens that they take over power. And according to the roadmap, therefore, after defeating and disarming Abiy Ahmed's forces and his associates, the second thing to happen was a provisional government of the victors at the federal level, and of the resistant forces in all the regions, including the ones that have been seeking constitutional self-rule within the federal structure. And they will have a provisional government that stays for up to between 3 months to 6 months time. And then the major role of the provisional governments is basically disarming the warring forces, the ones that were wreaking havoc in the country, and containing the war and stabilizing the country. The second phase will be a phase in which there will be an all-inclusive platform that will negotiate a transition, and there will be a transitional government that might go up until maximum of 1 year. And then, if the transition is smooth and we are ready for an election, etc., a democratic transition to democracy and a return to the constitutional signpost, one of the things that the provisional government has to do is to show a resolve, a commitment to address all the outstanding and enduring political questions that have created problems in the country for a long time. Example, there are demands for self-rule from various groups in the country, about 10 of them looking for their own state in the southern region. We have the Command, the Agaud, who want their own regional government and distinct identity. You have the Tigrayans who want self-determination in a referendum. We have Oromos who have been fighting for self-determination for the last 60 years, and they want to decide for themselves on whether they want to be in or outside of Ethiopia. At this point in time, the Oromo public has despaired on Ethiopia. And so this is the time to give the public a voice and decide once and for all whether they want to be an independent country or they want to live in Ethiopia as an autonomous regional state in the federation. And third, the Ogadenis, the Somali group, have long been, since 1953, have long been fighting for independence. And they have this outstanding and enduring question of self-determination, which has been militarily suppressed all the time. And the same thing is happening even now. And these long enduring political demands need to have a legal and constitutional solution. And the provisional government that TDF and OLA and the United Front establish have envisaged the need for showing commitment to resolve all these outstanding problems, to address all these outstanding problems, not solving them, but showing commitment so that we can have trust to come together and negotiate on a transitional government. So one of the things that we proposed and they kindly accepted is to come up with a referendum law, a referendum act, which also establishes a referendum commission and a procedure for referendum and setting timelines for doing referenda in all the regions. And this is one of the ways to show to the people that there is a commitment on the part of this new dispensation to address historic demands, political demands of the various groups in that country. So the future, according to the forces that are fighting Abiy Ahmed, is a future that has three phases. A future in which, after defeating, disarming, and containing Abiy Ahmed's forces and its associates, after removing the Eritrean element from the equation, then to establish a provisional government, then trying to facilitate the process towards creating a transitional government, and then the transitional government going into a constitutional democratic election, which also simultaneously conducts referenda for to resolve all outstanding political demands, political questions. And that way, Ethiopia might, with or without the constituent units such as Tigray, Ogaden, or Oromia, might have a long-lasting peace. Otherwise, there will be no hope. This area will never be stable, will never be calm, and will never be also a good partner to the international community for the Horn of Africa region. And on Abiy's side, it's all chaos. He wants to defeat everybody by force, much like Putin is trying to do. He wants to defeat everybody by force and suppress them and keep going that way. And that is not a very plausible road to pursue if you want to have a lasting peace, a stability in a very volatile, geostrategically globalized region such as the Horn of Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tsaggaye. There are thousands of untold stories, atrocities in Ethiopia. We're running out of time. And finally, beyond war, where is Ethiopia heading? How is it going to end? what is the Oromo future look like? At the same time, what the future of Tagarus, the Tigray people, look like? Politically, what is the alternatives for the people of Ethiopia, in particular Oromo and Tigray?
Yeah, that's part of some of the things that I was saying. Actually, boils connects with your question now. And as I said, Ethiopia has options to stop the war, to create access to those who need humanitarian aid, and to stabilize the country, to bring all stakeholders together to negotiate a political settlement. And this is what the West demands. That's not necessarily what is suitable, for example, for Oromos or for Tagarus, because you cannot sit down with someone who wishes you out of existence, someone who wants to eliminate you, someone who considers you a terrorist, someone who is calling for the international community to put them in the terrorist list. These people want to wish you out of existence. And there is no way you can sit with people who do not recognize you, who do not want you to sit down and to exist, actually, to exist at all. They want to wish you, they wish you away. They wish you out of existence. And in my view, as an Oromo person, and from the perspective of the Tagarus, there is no way you can sit with Abiy Ahmed and start a negotiation towards a political settlement. For two reasons. One, they don't want to see you alive. Two, because these are criminals. You can't plan a future with genociders. And you can't appease genociders. But be that as it may, the international community wants a negotiated political settlement. And they want everybody to calm down, to reduce, to scale down their demands, and to start negotiating. And this is partly because Abiy Ahmed is the darling of the West, the darling of the international community. The international community doesn't want to be seen as wrong on Abiy Ahmed. By giving him a Nobel Peace Prize, they want to vindicate themselves by seeing in the end that somehow he has settled this in a negotiated manner. So they don't want Abiy Ahmed to fail, because his failure is their failure, and they want to face saving for themselves. So that's what they want. So the option Abiy has is to sit down and say, okay, we stop this war. Let's find another way. Let's go to seek peace. And that way, at least he might get some amnesty for his group, for himself and his associates, at least at some level. And that way, we can go into a phased transition. That's one option. The other option is for Abiy to continue the war, an impossible war, a war that he will never win, because he can't win by eliminating 7 million people or 40 million people in Oromia. He just can't. That's an impossible mission. He might, stay in power to the extent the war continues, and in the end, he will be accountable, but he will have no country called Ethiopia. As the trends now show, the Tagaru people want referendum, at all costs. And just yesterday or the day before yesterday, the president of the Tigrayan region, Debretsion Gebramikael, has come out and says referendum is an inevitable eventuality. It is going to happen. Without it, we can't. Because I understand where they're coming from. Because this country simply tried to eliminate them. And there hasn't been any solidarity from the relevant Ethiopian public, those who own the Ethiopian state, which is the Amhara, basically. And no one condemned, no Amhara political or religious or cultural elite condemned the atrocities that was perpetrated on them. Mind you, the Tigrayans are the real Ethiopians. They are, in fact, the cradle of Ethiopia.
And now they are looking for secession from the country.
Absolutely.
All because of Prime Minister Abiy's administration.
Absolutely. It's the final act of despair that they are experiencing in the face of the Ethiopians, the Amhara community. And as you have seen, the patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Abba Matthias, condemned the atrocities in Tigray. But they looked at him and they said he's doing it because he's a Tigrayan. And they have been, the Prime Minister's advisor himself, Daniel Kibret, has been condemning the patriarch for condemning the atrocities, mind you.
He is the only priest, he is the only clergy, he's a patriarch, and all archbishops, priests, pastors, everyone was preaching war.
Absolutely. Not a single person except the Athletics Federation chief, Derartu Tullu, an Oromo athlete who has been an Olympian. She came out and said, this has been bad and the government has to look for a solution. And other than that, this is it's only the patriarch who has said it. Now, mind you, the patriarch is a Tigrayan and Derartu Tullu is an Oromo. No Amhara ruling class, whether it is a business class, a person, an intellectual, a cultural leader, no one, not a single official has come out to condemn the atrocities, to call for peace negotiation. In fact, they came out all in droves to attack Derartu, to attack the patriarch. So this shows to you how Ethiopia disowned its own core. Now, mind you, if you talk about Ethiopian history, the Abyssinian history, there is no history without Tigray. In fact, if you talk about Eritrean history, there is no history without Tigray. Because the Tigrayan Aksumite civilization is the centerpiece of the entire Amhara-Tigray continuum of the last 3,000 years. And Eritreans pull their history from Aksum, Amhara Ethiopians pull their history from Aksum, and there is no Ethiopia without Tigray. And the script that Ethiopia is proud of, the script, is basically from Tigray, And if Ethiopia has disowned and actually demonized the Tigrayans this much, what do they do to us, who have always been on the political margins and the imaginary, the Ethiopian political imaginary, who have been on the margins of the Ethiopian political imaginary for many years? And the Oromo, of course, has to be eliminated with no qualms whatsoever. Now, because of this, the Tigrayans want a referendum now. Just yesterday, as I said, the Tigrayan president, the president of the Tigrayan National Regional State, said referendum is an inevitable eventuality. There is no going forward without a referendum. Our people must decide for once and for all about their relationship with Ethiopia. In our view, he says, the relationship has been broken and broken for good. And so the other option, as I said, therefore, Abiy Ahmed has, is to continue on with the war and destroy Ethiopia. The continuation of the war is intended to eliminate Tigray, the Tigrayans, to eliminate Oromos, and to eliminate all the other peoples. Which, in other words, it's not just physically eliminating every single Oromo living alive or every Tigrayan person alive. They want to eliminate all the nationalists, all the self-respecting Tagarus and the self-respecting Oromos and Sidamas and so on. Number two, they want to eliminate your identity. You have to all become Ethiopian, not Oromo, not Tigrayans, and so on. Have you noticed how the Ethiopian political class refers to the Cairo movement of 2014 to 2018?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They say Ethiopian young protesters brought about the change. Not just to not refer to them as Oromo protesters. Because if you know the protest movement, it was called Oromo Protest. And the leaders the leaders are Cairo. Not to name Cairo and not to call them Oromos, they say Ethiopian Youngsters Protest Movement. So Oromos simply smile at that and say, this is our protest. What the hell are you talking about? Anyway, so they want to make sure that you don't capitalize on your distinct identity as Oromos, as Tagarus, as Somalis, as Sidamas. And that's why Abiy Ahmed's party changed itself from EPRDF, from OPDO, to Oromia Prosperity Party. And they don't even refer to themselves Oromia Prosperity Party. They just are PP, Prosperity Party. So they want to eliminate this identitarian politics referring to oneself as of a particular group. They want to outlaw referring to oneself as Oromos or Tagaru, etc. They want to make sure that everybody is just Ethiopian, you know. Once they do that, of course, they have finished their project, but they will not be able to do that. They cannot eliminate 7 million people in Tigray or 40 million people in Oromia. They cannot reduce the number of self-respecting Oromos, conscious Tigrayans, into insignificance, which means then what happens is an intense resistance against Abiy Ahmed's forces, whose military has already been broken beyond recognition, and who cannot continue the war with the current financial and economic situation. As a consequence of it, Abiy will continue with the war, but only to lose Ethiopia altogether, which means to turn it into a land of chaos, to generate more violence, and to generate more terroristic activities in the entire neighborhood. Okay, that's the second option he has. How much he can take this option depends on how much he thinks he will stay in power. If anything keeps him in power, Abiy Ahmed would do anything. If making peace will make him stay in power for longer than making war, he would go for it. But does he have an incentive to stay, to make peace so that he can stay in power? I don't think so. If he negotiates peace, then it means he will have to vacate his position, and possibly he will have to be handed over to an international criminal court to answer for his atrocities, or the atrocities that happened under his watch. So that's one option: peace or chaos. That's for Abiy Ahmed. For Oromos, well, we have survived the odds. We have resisted so far. The Oromo Liberation Army is at its strongest at this point in time, and it has put up a defense that really was robust for the last 3 years, over the last 3 years, and now it is ready to take over its country and start a provisional popular government in all localities. And that popular provisional government will help to stabilize the region, to take control of the region, and to make sure that the land that is stolen is restored, to make sure that peace and stability is reestablished, rule of law is reestablished for the moment. And then, of course, according to the roadmap that the United Front has already for itself, they will work together with other forces towards a transitional arrangement that will also facilitate not just a democratic election for the entire country, but also a referendum for addressing outstanding historic and contemporary political demands. And so the Oromo public has to be ready for that dispensation to come, for the Oromo Liberation Army to liberate its country and to work towards peace and stability and democracy with other forces fighting from other areas. And the Tagaru community, the same. The Tagaru community, no one can advise them anything at all, because they have stood their ground, they survived the odds, they have been subjected to unspeakable atrocities, and their region has been invaded by forces from 3 areas: Eritrean, Ethiopian National Defense Force, and the Amhara National and Regional State Special Forces, the militia, and the Fano. And the old Ethiopian veterans have been participating. Non-Ethiopian political advisors and military advisors have been participating. And international drones from Iran, from Turkey, from China, from UAE, all have been enlisted. And their country is completely decimated. The one thing they have is the morale of their public, the spirit of resistance that their people have. And of course, Abiy Ahmed wants to crush that by keeping them in a siege that blocks any humanitarian access to them. So these people have no option but fight back. And once they fight back and they have a breathing space, they want to decide their destiny. They want to determine their destiny freely in a referendum, because life with Ethiopia has become unlivable. And that resonates very well with Oromos. On the day I said, I'm on record saying this repeatedly in Amharic, on the day Hachalu Hundessa was assassinated and our friends and our political leaders were arrested, that day, the last bridge between Ethiopia and Oromia has been broken. Oromos have always been hopeful. Oromos have been always given Ethiopia the benefit of the doubt. They died for that country. My parents suffered for the many wars, fought in all the wars of that country. Many Ethiopian veterans have fought for that country, hoping that there will be an equality in citizenship in that country, that their children will be equal citizens in that country, that their children will not be displaced and dispossessed from their land, that their children will not lose their language in favor of Amharic language. They gave it their benefit. And very interesting, Hachalu Hundessa, just before he was assassinated, the last kinds of songs he was singing was that Oromo is the builder of the nation. Oromon biyya jaara malee, Oromon biyya diigare. Tikkaas gabbarree guddaa kanarra maal goonare. Oromon biyya jaara malee, biyya diigare. What he basically says is, we Oromos have given big, have given small, have given our all. And we have been building this nation, unlike what they say, that we have been destroying this nation. And in fact, he was hopeful somehow the change that came about because of the Oromo protest movement is going to be redemptive of Ethiopia. And that hope was completely shattered the day he died. And I said, if you are killed while talking about rebuilding Ethiopia, then what are you supposed to do to redeem Ethiopia as Oromo persons? And we have finally seen that our place in that country is no place. We have no place in that country. If the most loyal of Oromos have been assassinated in public, if Jawar Mohammed, while talking about the need for negotiation and peaceful political settlement, has been has been targeted for assassination, and when that failed, has been arrested for about a year and a half. If Bekele Garba, the apostle of peaceful political participation in that country, has been targeted for arrest and detention for over 9 times, and today his health is so deteriorated that just 2 days ago he fell while making a speech in the Oromo National Congress's annual General Assembly meeting. He's so frail that he could not finish a speech that he has written to read for the conference, because he has been jailed about 9 times in the last 2 decades. If Bekele has been targeted for this is the apostle of peaceful political struggle. He actually translated the book by Martin Luther King about non-violence movement, the last apostle of peaceful resistance in Ethiopia. If he is subjected for assassination, as the Ethiopian media outlets have been calling for, if he is targeted, he is subjected to this kinds of detention and arbitrary arrest, then what is the place of Oromos in Ethiopia? Why would you even consider to live in that country? So the time has come now for Ethiopia, for Oromos to decide their destiny, whether they want to live in Ethiopia or out of it, whether they build their own country or be a member of the Ethiopian country, which of course will give them only a marginal place in the political setup of that country. So the future is for Oromos first to resist, to defeat and disarm Abiy Ahmed, then to establish their provisional government, at least in their own territory, And thirdly, negotiate a transitional regime with other allies and dispose the rump state Ethiopia. If Tigray, Oromia, Ogaden are going to go their way, separate from Ethiopia, then we have to dispose of the rump state, because there is a legal element that you have to clear when you dissociate from Ethiopia. If the public so the public chose to stay in Ethiopia, then of course we'll have to plan a democratic federalist dispensation or a confederalist kind of dispensation, somehow a reassociation around the federal union, federal idea. It could be confederal, it could be federal, etc. And if this depends on the public's decision. When that happens, of course, you can deal with that. So the options are stark. The options are, however, very clear. And for Oromos and Tigrayans, the only option is to defeat Abiy Ahmed. If possible, negotiate with him in good faith if he accepts their precondition. If that's not possible, which is very unlikely, if that's impossible, then go their own way, control their country and their region, and establish a provisional government until referendum happens and free their country according to the decision of the referendum. That would be, I think, the end game.
Thank you, Dr. Tigray. It is very sad to learn that the people of Tigray and the government of Tigray are considering secession from Ethiopia. The current status of Ethiopia looks like the former Yugoslavia, the country which torn apart into 6 different nations. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is in the position of former Yugoslavian President Tito, and with a double role, covering also the position of General Slobodan Milosevic. Unless the international community intervene, Ethiopia can torn apart into different pieces and different nations. Nobody knows about the status of tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow. So what is your point on this? What's your analysis? How is the country going to be saved?
Yes, well, Abiy cannot be likened to Joseph Tito. Probably his predecessor would be considered as Marshal Tito. When Marshal Tito died, his replacements were people that are to date very anonymous, because they had a coalition that governs that republic after his death. He was such a staggering figure, such a big personality, charismatic leader that has somehow pieced that country together. When he died, a Serbian nationalist emerged from Serbia and started to re-centralize power by appealing to Serb nationalism and invoking Serb nationalism in the other republics. He first started his career by promising to fight for Serbians in Kosovo, Serbians in Vojvodina, and he annexed the 2 autonomous regions. Then he wanted to fight for the rights of Serbians in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in Croatia. And then the Slovenians said, this is not right. I think this is not a good place for us to go to live. They seceded. Then the Croats blocked Serbian army from proceeding to fight to suppress the Slovenians. And then the war erupted between a short-lived war between Slobodan Milosevic, Yugoslavia, and the Croatians. Then he used his stooges, his compatriots, Serbians in Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is a multi-ethnic state. And he used Karadzic. He found an ally in Radovan Karadzic, who was basically responsible for the ethnic cleansing and the genocide in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, and so on and so forth. Of course, Bosnia became independent after Croatia, and the rump state became the former Yugoslavia, which is Serbia and Montenegro. And Kosovo also later became independent. Now, many people think that it was ethnic federalism that disassembled, that led to the disassembling of Yugoslavia. But actually, what happened was it wasn't federalism, it wasn't ethnic federalism that led to the breakup of Yugoslavia. It was the attempt to undo the federal system, the attempt to take away the autonomy that Marshal Tito had granted to Vojvodina, to Kosovo, to all the 6 states that formed Yugoslavia. When Slobodan Milosevic wanted to encroach upon their autonomy in the name of union, creating a unity, then it became the undoing of Yugoslavia. Abiy Ahmed is playing more the role of Slobodan Milosevic. And it is no accident that just like it was in Milosevic, under Milosevic, in Ethiopia, under Abiy Ahmed, genocide and atrocities that humanity has not seen so far have happened. And after the atrocities, what happened in Yugoslavia? Yugoslavia became 5-6 small
countries.
states. Yes. And the same is going to happen in Ethiopia unless Abiy is stopped in time. And if it continues in accordance with his war plan now, I think inevitably there will be at least 4 states in Ethiopia and 4 new states in the Horn of Africa, which is Tigray, Ogaden, Oromia, and of course the rump Ethiopian state.
Thank you, Dr. Tagay. We're running out of time. The Ethiopian atrocities are so much, and there are tens of thousands of untold stories and issues. Is there any point you want to add before?
No, I'm done. I have stayed here for almost 2 hours, and I
yes.
think
yes, it's exactly 2 hours
here
since we started the show. Thank you. Hello, viewers. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and we thank you for your company. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Ocast Media YouTube channel, and also remember to share this discussion with your elected officials, the U.S. Senate members, and the U.S. House Representatives, so that they can hear the voice of voiceless Ethiopian suffering under the Abiy Ahmed administration. Thank you for your company. See you next time in another session. Goodbye.